Thank you very much for taking a pass on the Leafs' last game of the season to come and really learn what's about important in our future, about what are we doing, and in particular, what is City of Toronto doing about climate change. And we were inspired to do this series when we had reviewed David Miller's book on Solved, where he highlights that, in fact, the major cities around the world are doing much more than most provincial or national governments because they're not hampered by trying to please a whole country. They are, in fact, required to do certain things to meet their municipal requirements. And so as we read his book and saw some of the positive things that are going on throughout the world, and then took a look particularly at some of the examples he was giving of City of Toronto, where he had been mayor, and introduced some of the issues around climate change, that we're quite pleased with what's going on in TransformTO. And our guest speaker tonight is Chaim Koff, who is a part of one of the project groups within TransformTO. And within his slides, he's got a good breakdown of how that breaks out into 4 different working groups and where he fits within that, particularly in existing buildings and what the city is doing to support both commercial and residential buildings to meet the net zero targets that they have set and moved up, in fact, now to 2040. He's a certified energy manager with a variety of net zero energy advisor certifications from Ryerson, or now Metropolitan University, as an MBA grad. He's passionate about the environment and supporting the development and retrofit of low carbon, affordable housing solutions. He's currently the project manager with the City of Toronto's Energy Retrofit Loan Program, leading a portfolio of over 20 million in funded projects and 30 million in development pipeline. In his previous role, he has helped dozens of organizations with level 1 energy audits to guide building managers on identifying and implementing efficiency solutions. And he is known for his innovative business case approach to low carbon retrofits. I'll now, if you could set him up as a co-host, Leanne, so that he can show his slides from his screen.
I'll just take a minute, Peter. Well, I thank you for that introduction. Yep. And it is a pleasure to meet all of you. I also recognize that this is a group from the North Toronto cluster of churches. And as I'm listening to this, typical city speak for our introductions, I would also recognize that biblically speaking, we don't need to necessarily boast that much. So I take that interesting point as you brought forward. But so today I will hopefully have the opportunity to introduce you to some of the city's climate change initiatives that we have embarked on in order to support existing buildings. And an outline of the presentation will include details of the city's climate change action strategy, an introduction to my unit in particular, which is the Environment and Climate Division, the net zero strategy, so i.e. setting the goals of what the city of the city's goals for existing buildings, what the City of Toronto has initiated and completed as far as corporate actions, available programs and initiatives to the public, and then we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A at the end of the presentation.
And can I just interrupt? I'm not seeing it in full screen. I'm seeing your next slide off to the side, so you might want to go to full screen.
So tell me now, can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
yep.
Okay. So I had to swap the view. Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. So we'll just start, if possible, with a land acknowledgement. So personally, I do believe that the land acknowledgement should be personable. So personal. So if anybody has anything to add after the land acknowledgement, please feel free to do so. And I also would take the opportunity to mention that I'm very comfortable with any questions coming mid-presentation. So if there's any slide that you would like to ask or seek additional clarification, have a comment, please be sure to raise your hand or speak out, and I'll be sure to respond to you. So we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of the many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now the home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. And so, would anybody like to add anything? Okay. So with that, we'll move forward into the TransformTO strategy. Peter had provided some background information on, I guess, the goals of your group, and the fact that you had all, or many of you had read Solved by David Miller. And I think that is a very significant first step in recognizing the opportunities that we have for climate action, and really also at recognizing how much has already been completed and how we've already set ourselves up for being able to achieve and meet some of our goals. So TransformTO is the City of Toronto strategy to reduce local greenhouse gas emissions, improve our health, grow our economy, improve social equity, and increase climate resilience. Everyone will have a part to play in transforming Toronto into a low-carbon city. And the idea behind this is that this is a holistic strategy. It's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. It doesn't provide only one. It's not even actually one strategy. It's actually comprised of several strategies. The development was guided by principles including the advancing of social equity, protecting low-income residents, contributing to poverty reduction, improving public health, really on providing a holistic and improve society for all residents, and especially the residents of Toronto, just because that's the organization that we represent. In 2019, the city issued what we refer to as a climate emergency. And on October 2nd, 2019, Toronto Council unanimously voted to declare climate emergency and accelerate its efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change. A little bit of the background. And so I'm not sure if in any of your previous presentations you had some information around the emissions in the City of Toronto. We've
had some of this through Live Green.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
So Live Green is also a TransformTO, is part of the TransformTO organization. And so you will see a lot of overlap definitely between what Live Green is representing and what we have made available today. So a little bit about Toronto's 2020 GHG inventory. Part of the reason that it's 2020 and not 2023 is that it takes a bit of time for us to get the latest inputs, coefficients, changes, consumption patterns. And so this is actually currently being updated, and I would assume that we'll have updated numbers in 2024, but representing 2022 GHG inventories. What's important to recognize in this graphic is that 58% of carbon emissions in the City of Toronto are attributed to buildings. So it's actually quite significant because if we're looking for opportunities for improvement, we feel that it's important or critical to target the largest emitter of carbon, and that would be buildings. Now, buildings don't necessarily mean only the high towers. It also means single-family houses. It also means triplexes, sixplexes. Any type of structure is really what we're referring to. 33% of that is transportation and 9% waste. I guess I'm just going to move this second. It's interesting to note that Toronto surpassed its 2020 target of a 30% reduction in GHG emissions from a 1990 baseline. However, 2020 was an anomaly year due to COVID-19. And we know that we have a lot of work in order for us to reach our net zero by 2030 or net zero by 2040, 65% reduction by 2030. Toronto's buildings are comprised of, or the building emissions in the city of Toronto are comprised of 56% residential, 32% commercial and institutional, 12% industrial. But what I would really call your attention to is actually the slide to the right. And it's really a representation of the fact that natural gas is actually the key emitter. It's the key carbon emitter that's triggering that 58% of carbon emissions. So what do we use natural gas for? I think we have a slide on this. No, we do not. What do we use natural gas for? We use natural gas for heating. We use natural gas for hot water. We use natural gas to keep ourselves warm in the winter. And unfortunately, it has a very high emissions factor. And so when we're targeting and looking for opportunities in the building sector, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. We're really looking at different opportunities for electrification. It's identifying other sources of fuel or other sources of non-fossil fueled heating solutions. So we'll go through it a little bit more in detail later on in the presentation. A little bit of background information around the Environment and Climate Division, how it's comprised, what it represents. So we have an executive director. His name is James Nolan, and then we have four smaller entities that are come out of that report back to James Nolan. So the first one is Public Energy New Developments, and that's really governing the development of the new buildings. As you probably know, any of you that are local to Toronto, you see cranes all throughout the city. There are very strict guidelines in place right now for new developments. And as we move forward into 2024, 2025, you're actually going to see those guidelines and restrictions move towards lower carbon requirements. And that's continuing to move forward until hopefully when 2030 comes forward, where actually all new construction will have to be net zero. So it's very significant. And the goal behind that is the reason for that, I would call it tiered or progressive, progressive enhancement to our to these goals is that innovation and technology is not currently available to achieve what we're really looking for. And so we've set goals and timelines to align with where the industry and innovation are expecting to be. So it's really an alignment strategy. We have our team, the Public Energy Existing Buildings, which I represent, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Then there's Outreach and Engagement, and that's the Live Green team. And then Policy and Research, and they're the groups that are setting the policies for the city, internal and external. A little bit about my team specifically. We have our manager, and then we're broken down into a program delivery and operations team, program development team, and then we're also developing our own policy and strategy implementation. We'll talk a lot more about this. I just wanted to give you like an overview of what our unit looks like. Suffice it to say, like the city is very vested in supporting low carbon innovation, low carbon retrofits. This is a pretty significant team that was put together rather rapidly. I've been with the city actually now for 11 years, but almost everyone you see on this slide has been there for less than one. So it's a rather new initiative. A little bit about our strategy. So we developed a net zero strategy in 2019 that provides the goal of it is to achieve deep emission reductions across the building sector, support the building industry in making the transition to the low carbon sector, and support the realization of multiple co-benefits and social equity, economic impact, resilience, and health. We've created or identified 9 strategic policy actions that we expect will be coming into force over the next, let's say, 8 to 10 years. And I don't want to go so deep into each of these, but the idea behind it is that we're going to be requiring building owners to start monitoring, measuring, and recognizing the performance of their building. So just if we even look at the first one, we talk about requiring annual emissions performance reporting and public disclosure. In short, we refer to it as EWRB, or Energy Water Reporting Benchmark, and it provides a score actually for every building in the city of Toronto. We're also going to be requiring emissions performance targets, and even more importantly is that we're going to be looking for energy and emissions audits and tune-ups. So not only do we want people to identify where they have opportunities to improve, we actually want them to improve their building. And again, like we mentioned previously, of course, the environmental impact is our key goal here. However, resident comfort and all of the other health benefits that are attributed to these recommendations, tune-ups, building improvements will also be realized by residents in the city of Toronto. We're also making support and resources available, including my program, which is like the Energy Retrofit Loan Program, or we also provide support in the form of what we call it's a walkthrough audit where we'll provide building owners with guidance and advice on location by reviewing their building and identifying opportunities for them to improve. We're also obviously advocating and partners with other levels of government to try to implement changes and identify funding for some of these projects that we're looking to support. This is a very high level view of what or when these proposed strategy pieces will come into effect. This is really it's important to know that they are coming. These timelines are definitely not confirmed or formal, and it's really provided just as an example to demonstrate that we are looking for a 2030 timeline when these requirements would become mandatory. And then as we move towards our 2040 net zero goal, people would use the findings that, over the next, let's say now it's 2023, over the next 7 years, they'd prepare themselves for these requirements in 2030. And then from 2030 to 2040, people would begin to retrofit their buildings to actually achieve net zero by 2040. A little bit about what we've done so far. And this is actually, I guess, like what our group does. So to date, multiple programs and initiatives have been developed for the existing buildings in the city of Toronto, including over 70 million in approved and active loan applications for energy projects. 4,500 buildings have been retrofitted. That represents over 320 million square feet of floor space. We've successfully assisted over 80 building portfolios with technical guidance, incentives, grants, project implementations, support for GHG reduction projects, and over $1 million in funding and grants secured for these buildings. We have over 5.9 million in approved loans retrofitting over 232 single-family homes. This is actually a little bit outdated. I believe the number is now 9.7 in approved loans for single-family home retrofits. And so we are working diligently to help people implement these net zero projects. They're typically slightly complicated, they require change, and so our team is available really to provide one-on-one support and guide people on these initiatives. What else did I want to add? At the end of the presentation, I'll show you, we do have a case study actually recently with a church that we supported, and they actually implemented a low carbon heat pump project. So that's really what our goal is to say. What I'm trying to say is that our goal is we want to work with the building owners, with people. We're on the ground, we're available to talk to, give guidance, and that's what we stand for. Peter, you had noted, or I guess in the request, there was some request to look at what the City of Toronto has done. And so as far as the City of Toronto corporate strategy, a little bit of background behind them. The city's corporate real estate management net zero carbon plan applies to all city-owned facilities. So it's not just City of Toronto buildings that you see that are, our core structures. It's all of the buildings, the police stations, the fire stations, TCH, anything that's within the city of Toronto's real estate management is all going to be focused on achieving net zero by 2040. So it's a very significant strategy and goal that they've set for themselves, and they're working towards it today. A little bit about their 2022 corporate accomplishments. So first off, they've developed citywide working groups established to align city processes with the net carbon goal. This is actually, I want to really highlight this because many building owners, and when you talk about the city, there are groups and teams and organizations that use these facilities. And as we try to align the city's goals with their usages of the building, like with how the building is currently operating, so the operating of the building, we need to work directly with the end users of these buildings to ensure that we can align our city processes and start to retrofit for net zero. We've developed a standardized scope of work, and this is about providing a little bit more of a prescriptive pathway for achieving net zero. There were also some net zero feasibility studies that were initiated or completed at Etobicoke Olympium, 14 St. Clements, EMS stations, and the Mount Dennis Child Care Center. So these are projects that are actually in process. A little bit more. Sorry, the numbering system here fell apart, so my apologies. We've had federal funding applications submitted for emission reduction projects at Toronto Animal Services, Metro Hall, and St. Lawrence Hall. An RFP was issued for a standardized equipment and project specification. And so the idea behind this is when work is going to be completed in the city, that may not be directly related to net zero. So for example, you need to replace a pool. A public pool is slated for replacement in 2025. How do we ensure that that pool is going to select a heating system that's that's not fossil fueled, and it's low carbon? And so we've developed a specification that we can provide to all of the project managers in the city, requiring them to specify low carbon solutions for any project. So a pool, be it a community rec center, be it a police station, we're constantly looking for the lowest carbon opportunity, like the building that will provide the lowest carbon and emit the lowest amount of carbon and have the lowest carbon footprint. We have also started to implement recommissioning of the geo-exchange system at McGregor Arena, high-level audits of 10 city facilities in support of the Waterfront Neighborhood Center and School, which has been completed. So I'll tell you a little bit about this project. On the bottom right corner is actually a picture of the building. And if any of you have or are familiar with the waterfront in the city of Toronto, this building is actually it's located directly next to the lake. It's on the lake basically. And so the city has invested in a project to source the heating and cooling from the lake. And correct me if I'm wrong, last week your presentation included some information around the N-Wave system. So this building is actually using a customized miniature N-Wave system, deep lake water cooling, specifically for one building. And we've demonstrated that it is possible. And we actually have a neighboring condo building that is looking at the same, they're looking to replicate and implement in their building as well. So it's really innovative, and really we're excited to see how it continues operation, all the energy savings, measuring it and making it available as far as an information package to the public. And so that's the city of Toronto as what we've done corporately. As far as our public programs and initiatives, so that's my team. So a little bit about what we do. We want to help enable or improve projects. We want to build knowledge and capacity in the market, in the industry. We want to ready the market for upcoming municipal policy changes. And we want to demonstrate project effectiveness. We acknowledge that there is innovation and change occurring in the market. We acknowledge that it is difficult to be the first mover, to be the leader in impacting that change. I mean, you're here tonight, you know that it's not necessary. Not everyone is willing to take time during the Leafs game and be here. And that's exactly it. We want to work with the leaders to enable their projects and really provide those learnings for the public. A little bit about our current programs, and this is actually a list of the current programs that we have available. So we have navigation and support services that provides guidance. Better Homes TO is our single-family home guidance program. We provide renewable energy estimates. We actually have an online tool that people can use, and I think I have a slide about it, so I don't want to talk too much about it. We have a STEP program, green. I'm not going to go through them all here because I actually have slides. And then we have our financing and incentives program, including energy retrofit loans, which is available for commercial and condo buildings, home energy loan program, again, single family housing, high rise, which is for commercial. Again, if people have questions, they'll contact us directly, and then we'll direct them to the right program for them. A little bit about, I actually only selected 2 or 3 slides from our programs to really highlight, but they are all available at the end in the appendix. So the 2 or 3 slides that I really wanted to focus on was the navigation and support services. What this is it refers to the audit or the walkthrough that I was referring to earlier. And that includes an identification of potential efficiency opportunities in a building, identification and access to incentives and financing, overcoming hurdles with project implementation. And the most important piece here is that we offer tailored support and act as a trusted advisor. All of our participants in the navigation support services meet us, work with us, know our cell phone numbers, call us, all buildings in the city of Toronto are eligible. And we continue to work with buildings to identify the projects and help them through the entire implementation. The renewable energy support is a no-cost consultation for residents and building businesses who are interested in solar PV, geothermal, geo-exchange, energy storage. What this is that they will provide the business case for any entity seeking to invest in any type of renewable generation. So if it be solar panels, if it's geo, is anyone unfamiliar with geo or solar that they'd like me to talk a little bit more about, like what the technology is?
We actually have one of our members that's on the call here who has recently implemented geothermal for their home.
Oh, remarkable. That's excellent.
And I believe they went through one of these programs.
Excellent. So geothermal, we are seeing more projects implementing geothermal. Typically, again, it's really found in new construction, just because it's easier to implement, especially in the city of Toronto, where you're constricted. You have you don't have so much floor space. You don't have a lot of green area necessarily around your home. But we are seeing increased interest. And we do have several retrofit projects occurring currently. And I also wanted to call your attention to a future federal clean technology investment tax credit, which really provides a tax credit of up to 30% of the capital cost for eligible equipment, and likely going to be including solar generation. And so it's actually currently in effect since the March announcement of the 2023 budget. The challenge is that there is no information available yet on the CRA website. So it will be available soon, but for now, we just encourage people to keep checking back. But it is current, meaning that technically, if somebody would start their investment now, they would be eligible to receive that 30% tax credit.
Save your receipts.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. My program is the Energy Retrofit Loan Program, my program that I represent. The building owners can benefit from the city's collaboration to learn how projects can be improved, increase net operating income, capitalization rates, and values. Some examples of our recent projects include heat pumps, chillers, boilers, BAS replacement upgrades, And we're actually seeing a lot more building owners start to ask about windows. And that's something that we find that a lot of the buildings in the city are aging. And the windows are starting to be leaky, are starting to leak. They're starting to damage the envelope around the windows. And so we're spending a lot of time working with owners to try to identify, I guess, capital options or how they can pay for window retrofits. Maggie, sorry, please.
Thank you, thank you. Just on that point, I live in a townhouse that's part of a condo corporation, and so the windows fall under the kind of common elements piece. But when we approached the city about these loans, I was told, well, you have to do it household by household. So each owner would have to do their own. And that just didn't work for what we were able to do as the condo. Is there any way around that? Or is there, we did go ahead and replace all the doors, but the windows we couldn't afford to. So that's the next step. It would be great to know that there's a loan assistance out there that we could access.
So the answer to your question is yes and no. The reason you were responded to, the reason the answer was that it has to be household by household is because the easiest way to finance windows is through our HELP program, Home Energy Loan Program. And that would be unit by unit. And you would be able to maximize the amount of funding, and everyone who could take advantage of it would. The Energy Retrofit Loan Program can fund the condo corp, so it can provide financing directly to the condo corp. The challenge with the Energy Retrofit Loan Program is that we look to identify and develop a business case around implementing this retrofit. And so it's just a lot more evaluation that's required to enable this type of retrofit. It's not something that it can be done simply, but it can be done. We are working with the building right now to implement. And provided that there is a capital plan and funding available to repay the debt, then the city is interested in working and supporting. The reason for this is that many condo corps have a reserve plan in place, and every owner is paying into that reserve plan for whatever it is. Now, when you add on a significant loan, often the reserve fund fee or your monthly maintenance costs can be increased substantially. And the city, well, because you need to pay back the debt as well. And so that's the goal of the Energy Retrofit Loan Fund, is to identify projects that would not see a dramatic increase in your maintenance costs. So it's to identify projects that would not see a significant impact to your maintenance costs. That being said, some buildings are reaching end of life, and sometimes you do actually need to invest in your windows, and even though there will be an increase in the maintenance fees. And so therefore we are willing to work with organizations, but it's a lot harder, it's a lot more difficult to have that discussion when people are learning that their maintenance fees are going to go up significantly.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Better Homes TO. So for anyone with a single family house, Better Homes TO is a one-stop shop for Toronto residents to help make their homes more energy efficient and climate friendly. And it's really nice. It has some easy to use case studies, and it's all very available, guiding homeowners on different retrofits that they can implement in their home. So again, this slide is probably, many of you might be familiar with geothermal. So a little bit about geothermal is that the idea is that you are using the ground to source your heating and cooling costs, clean heat without reliance on fossil fuels, the highest efficiency system, optimal heat delivery, and the lowest temperatures. In the court, and there is some city support available. So if it's residential, they can leverage the city's HELP program. If it's commercial, there would be the city's Energy Retrofit Loan Program. And if it's federal, we would recommend taking advantage of the Clean Technology Investment Tax Credit that I had mentioned previously. Again, less information, not that much information, but this is actually a hyperlink. So if we do share the presentation, you can access and learn more about the Clean Technology Investment Credit by clicking. This is a little bit about the Better Homes TO website. This is exactly what it looks like. So if you have a renovation or upgrade, you can click on it. If you're looking for financing, you just select exactly what you're looking for, and it'll help walk you through. A little bit more about the home energy loan program. So Maggie, you did bring it up, so thank you very much. The help loan, the reason or the rationale why there's no business case attached to it is because help loans are attached to the property, not the owner. And they're repaid via the property tax system. So it's actually the owner of the unit would be repaying the debt by just increasing the amount of property tax that they're repaying. And if in the event that they sell their house or move from the property, the new owner would take over that higher tax payment, and they wouldn't see it necessarily as a loan repayment. It would actually just be attached to their property taxes. Now it's not hidden; it's very visible, and we're completely transparent that it is a help assessment, but it does help frame the loan differently, and we find that buyers are a lot more willing to accept that responsibility. Loans can be repaid at any time without penalty, or if the home is sold, payments can be assumed by the new owner. Some of the eligible measures: high efficiency furnaces, air source heat pumps, and we're seeing a lot more interest now in level 2 chargers, battery storage. And we've even expanded it to limited health and safety measures. So really providing a holistic financing program. Okay, any questions on the existing buildings initiatives? No. Okay, so seeing none, we're going to talk a little bit about around the new construction. So there are, as all of you know, there are, oh, Caroline, please. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Hi, sorry about that. It took me a minute to kind of click on it. Anyway, so I'm seeing all these Toronto initiatives. How do they fit in with like the audits and the some of the other things I wrote down here? How do they fit in with the federal program, but I guess it maybe still is called the Canada Homes program, that has audit requirements and grants for specific projects for residences. So I just wanted to, how do the two fit together? I mean, when you talk about the services provided by the city, would they give you or give people like the whole gamut of like what's available from provincial, Toronto, municipal, and federal, and say this is what you need to do, or how do the two fit?
Great question. The answer is that they're stackable. So when one would visit the Better Homes TO website, our first step is always recommending people take the funding from the greener homes. The grant is $5,000. The loan is $30,000. It's low interest, and it's a great way to move forward. The city's loan is much more significant. It's up to $140,000. So it enables you to go that much deeper and that much further. So you start with whatever is available federally, if there are any incentives, and then you add on the city's help initiative. So if you need 50, 40, however much additional funding that you require, you would just add it in. What's really nice is that all those audit requirements that you've referenced are the same. So you would have your energy audit for your for your Canada Greener Homes grant, and you would be able to use that for the home energy loan program as well.
Okay. So what the city really provides big time is the loans. There are no separate grants that the city is providing. It's the low relative, I'm assuming it's low interest loans that are available.
Correct. For homeowners, yes, there are no grants. And yeah, so it is absolutely, it's a large pool of money that's available for low carbon retrofits. The other key piece is that, again, the Canada Greener Homes grant will also help pay for the audit. And that's really important to know as well, because if you implement the work, you'll receive a refund or a rebate on all the costs.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed though, that they only want you to put it in once. So you have to, if you were sort of thinking of doing things on a gradual basis, it doesn't really work that well. You have to get it all done and then have the second audit and go for the and then apply, well, not apply, but then get the grant money back. So you can't just sort of do most of it and then, oh, well, I still want to put in one window. Can I just put in this now? No, you have to, you start all over again if you're going to do that.
Yeah, I would use this opportunity to also mention, actually, with all of our programs, and the federal programs and provincial incentives that are available, it's really critical to get pre-approved prior to implementing the project. There's very limited availability for post-project, there's almost nothing available post-project.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. It is a challenge, and it's a long process, right? You have to get another audit, you have to get an assessment, you have to implement the project, and then get your funding. Yeah, no, it probably wouldn't be worth it.
If anyone else has questions, you can use the chat facility under More. It drops down, and you can either type into chat or at least raise your hand with that, so that we can easily see somebody's got another question. Thanks.
Okay, so now we've talked about how to retrofit older buildings. How do we ensure and create a structure that the City of Toronto won't be developing more buildings that are emitting carbon? How do we protect for the future? And so I want to talk a little bit about what we call the Toronto Green Standard. So the Toronto Green Standard, or TGS, we're currently in version 4, but it provides a standardized approach for building developers to build with green, I guess let's call it a green standard. I'm sure there's some language here that I should have added, but my apologies. So Toronto, the TGS upgrades are sections 5 areas: air quality, energy efficiency with GHG and resilience, water balance, quality and efficiency, ecology, and waste in the circular economy. The TGS authority is governed under the City of Toronto Act, and that is the provincial authority authorization allowing the city to create this Toronto Green Standard. And the program is estimated savings are over 1 million tons of CO2 emission equivalents by 2050. And the equivalent of that is almost 300,000 vehicles off the road each year. So it's quite significant, assuming that every building actually builds to TGS Green Standard version 4. A little bit of background behind it. So I know we were... Actually, I'm going to direct, before I go into this slide, I actually want to direct you to the right, specifically to the image. The TGS standard is a series of initiatives and goals for every developer. And so if you look in the first column, it talks about the UHIs, not solar readiness, renewable energy production, and it really guides the building owners and requires them to explain how they're hitting these specific TGS requirements. And so it's a checklist, and it asks for owners to detail exactly what they're doing to meet this checklist. Now, Peter, I think you had referenced, or what is the connection or the alignment between LEED program and the TGS? That
was questions.
Yeah, so while they do have some overlap, the goal behind the TGS and LEED is to work cohesively and enable the building owners to achieve LEED and also meet the highest standard of the TGS. So a little bit about LEED for anyone who is looking to learn about it. It's the U.S. Green Building Council has developed LEED version 4 BDNC, an international voluntary rating system for new construction and major renovations. It's recognized across North America for sure, and even probably worldwide. And it guides building owners on developing to the highest standards of not just carbon, but of all environmental standards. And it's really rather recognized. So what the city thought to do is that we developed what's called the Toronto LEED Supplement Comparison Summary. And that is a summary of the TGS standard requirements as compared to the LEED version 4 standard requirements or credits. And then we actually created this summary. So I wish maybe there's a pointer. Yes, there is. Here, I'll just use this for a second. So there is actually like the opportunity for a developer to look and see. So for example, let's just take this one right here. A district energy connection, that's a assessment requirement for the TGS. So if you look through the comparison summary, you would identify and recognize that that's exclusive to TGS. But when it comes to solar readiness, the previous one, GHG 2.1, that is a requirement for TGS and LEED. However, the requirements are somewhat different. So it's important to check out both of them. And so this really guides developers on how they can find alignments and achieve both the LEED requirements and the TGS requirements. And it's also
it's good to see that there's a fair bit of overlap on that at least.
Oh yeah, there is a lot of overlap. Typically, a developer building to higher standard TGS will always achieve LEED. If you do build to LEED, it doesn't necessarily guarantee TGS. It doesn't necessarily align both directions. And that's because, so a little bit of background, I guess I could have put it in a slide to really give you a lot of information around LEED, but what LEED does is it's a points-based system. So you need to achieve a certain amount of points in order to meet their designation and their rating. And so you can select some of the lower standards when it comes to, let's say, carbon, and some of the higher standards when it comes to accessibility, environmental, soil, embodied carbon, and you may meet LEED requirements, but the TGS has minimum standards for all of the different functions. So I'll just take it back one slide.
Would this mostly apply to new buildings then, or can some
only new buildings? Okay. So there is a LEED, I guess there is a LEED rating system for retrofits. It's called LEED EBAM. It isn't as widely acknowledged, accepted, and primarily the reason for it is that it's an expensive rating to get. So you don't find as much of this being done in the existing buildings.
The reason I asked that is I've seen some commercial buildings in North York, Willowdale, where I am, that seem to have put up a LEED designation notice or acknowledgement, but it's a building that's been there for at least 10 years. So,
again, I don't know that specific building, but if you would ask me, I would tell you that that is a LEED rating that they earned upon construction.
Okay.
So they received it 10 years ago and they just left it there. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's not 100%, but not most of the time. What you will see in many commercial buildings is BOMA Best, BOMA-BEST, and that's a much cheaper certification. And it does also provide similar type of verification and identification that this building is pursuing carbon decarbonization and improved operations or best practice in operations. And you'll see that all over the city of Toronto.
Will we start to see acknowledgement of buildings meeting a Toronto Green Standard?
Interesting. No.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a long-term goal of theirs, but as of now, there is no official recognition. You will start seeing, in the next couple of years, some recognition on the existing building operation, just to bring it back. Like that will definitely be occurring. But yeah, new construction, interesting. Yeah, you don't really see it. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Caroline?
Doesn't apply to most of us here anyway. So.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, the TGS is the same as what you're calling the Toronto Lead Supplement? Is that, or are there two different things?
So the TGS is the standard that the city
Right.
has developed for all building owners. So in order to build a building, you'll need to so I didn't pull it up here, but maybe if we have time after, I will. But it's whenever a building is seeking development and they're seeking permitting, they'll have to provide studies and verification around air quality. They're going to have to demonstrate that their building energy emissions and resilience are meeting the city's minimum standards, water quality and efficiency, ecology and biodiversity. So maybe I'll give some examples around them. Like air quality, our goal is to ensure that we have healthy buildings. And that means that, you see all these new towers that are going up. Some of them don't have operational windows. How do we ensure that there's going to be adequate airflow through the building? If we build a building that doesn't have adequate airflow, what you'll have is what's referred to as a sick building. And the idea is that you're circulating air within your building, and it's just bringing germs and throughout the building. It's just carrying it over from one unit to the other. It's not healthy. And so, good building practice will anyways recognize that you need outside airflow, but you don't always have good building practice. Hopefully you do, but it's important for us to ensure that is being done in a standardized fashion, one that we can compare building to building and demonstrate to organizations that aren't building the way we would like them to go forward. We can show them that all the other buildings in Toronto have managed to do this, and it's been affordable, and they've managed to pursue and find the product, whatever it is. So it is effective. Building energy emissions and resilience could include a study around district energy. It includes a minimum operational. So like we're asking them to be as efficient as possible, but they'll have to demonstrate. They actually have to provide what's called an energy model. So it'll tell the city exactly how this building is estimated to, or how much energy the building is estimated to use, what the carbon emissions are going to come forward. Similarly with water quality and efficiency, are there low flow toilets? Are there low flow showers? If there aren't, what other actions have you done? When we're talking about water, if the building has a pool, there could be some water recovery. Ecology and biodiversity, that's actually one of the most significant areas. It talks about animal habitats, ensuring that you're protecting birds. We know that there are migration issues, and of course, waste in the circular economy. Now, interestingly enough, I didn't really focus this presentation at all on waste, but if for those of you that live in a building, you're familiar with the chute where people can take their waste and throw it down. Newer buildings today are being built with three options: waste, garbage, recycling, and organic. And that's really a key requirement. So it helps to promote conscientious waste management and increased organics collection, and it really is having a very positive effect.
And we've heard of some older buildings that are actually switching it around so that organics is the chute, and you have to take any garbage down to a separate bin.
Absolutely. Have you seen the video of the building in Scarborough that has that?
Yeah, that was the one.
From T. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just? Sorry, Peter. I was just. Can I just ask how much of this, because you're talking about if buildings choose to or something, how much of it is mandatory for new buildings to fulfill the minimum standards of the Toronto Green Standard, and how much of it is sort of voluntary? Like what's the current status for new buildings and what they have to do?
So I could get you some of the exact information offline. There are strict requirements, and the TGS version 1 is the minimum requirement, and a building cannot proceed without. They will not actually receive permitting without that TGS version 1. Okay. As TGS version 1 is scheduled to be, I guess it's going to be going offline, and we're going to be requiring all building owners to reach TGS version tier 2 in the next few years. And the idea is that by 2040 or even earlier, buildings are going to be required to meet TGS standard version 4. So we're continuing to drive people towards higher versions, and each version actually incorporates more stricter requirements for building owners. So while the minimum standard is mandatory, some of the higher requirements or the higher standards are still voluntary. Now, we do provide an incentive, and I think I have information around it. No, I do not. We do provide an incentive of up to 25% of the development charges, which is actually quite significant. And organizations that are willing to invest in TGS Tier 4 or Tier 3 can actually receive even more money. And so that is an incentive to the developer to develop to a higher standard. Yeah. So
sorry, I've got one more question.
Yeah, please.
How does it fit? I apologize. I don't want to take over here, but so with the province saying in their latest thing that they're going to be approving buildings without development charges, how does that fit in to what you're saying?
So, the development charge is an interesting question. The City of Toronto has really pointed out to the province that we do require some development charges in order to keep the city operational. So again, I don't know exactly where that's going to land. However, that will only create challenge with regards to the incentive. With regards to the requirement, even with Bill 23, and I actually referenced it a little bit later, the province has acknowledged the need for the TGS, and there are some changes that were implemented. And again, when I created the slide, I had thought that they were just proposals, but then I learned yesterday that they are not proposals. They're actually going into effect. So the province has supported the continuation of the TGS, and it looks like that's 100% going to still be there. And so we are hopeful that we will have an incentive program to continue to deliver and support that higher, to support developers in pursuing higher levels of the TGS. But I guess potentially there will be less money made available. So. Yeah, and again, I don't know that we have so much detail around what a future of no development charges looks like. If that's every building, if that's every location, again, I'm unfamiliar with it. But
I'll just point out to watch your time a bit, because we've spent quite a bit of time on this section, and I know you've got more slides to cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up to general questions.
Sorry.
Okay. No worries. Sure, we're going to move forward. So just a little bit more about the LEED and the TGS. So we have LEED, which is its own standard, Toronto Green Standard, which is our own standard offered by the city, and then there's the comparison summary that helps building owners really compare them. So sample TGS requirements, there was a discussion around embodied emissions, and that is a key requirement actually for TGS. Developers are required to track and report embodied or carbon emissions associated with materials and process throughout the life cycle of a building. That requirement is TGS Tier 1. So it's bare minimum. In order to get your permit, you're actually going to need to report on your embodied emissions. Similarly, solar and green roofs are mandated under TGS Tier 1. Every building in the City of Toronto will either have solar or green roofs, and we actually offer an incentive to support retrofits and new construction projects for solar green roofs. And it's neat actually. If you go around downtown, you can try to look up, and often you can see trees growing from the rooftop. You asked about Bill 23, provincial build more homes faster, and the impacts on the TGS. So the city has recommended some key changes to the legislation to protect the TGS. The first line around removes ability through the City of Toronto Act. It's actually just copied from the city's recommendations to the province, but the proposed revision is actually what I was referring to. So the City of Toronto Act 11452, Section 4, be revised to read matters related. I don't know if I need to actually read it, but it's it's that they developed or created an allowance for the City of Toronto to continue to offer and require the TGS. And the only real difference is that instead of it being contingent upon the act, it's actually now going to be a City of Toronto bylaw. So it's actually going to become stricter in the implementation rather than being more lenient. Some links and resources that are made available here includes the TransformTO, so you can learn more about the strategy, you can visit it, you can read it, it's pretty long, or you can ask me for a summary, which we basically did today. And the Better Buildings Partnership, again, that's the existing buildings initiatives. Solar TO, if you have an address in the City of Toronto and like to see exactly how much solar or renewable generation potential there is, please visit there, navigations, and just some of the forms that we have made available as well. Yeah, and with that, I think we'll turn to Q&A.
Oh, that's great. And I think, for people to go to that TransformTO site, you can drill down into some of these other levels, because I know he's covered a lot of information here. And for each person, it's going to be dependent on, are they a homeowner or a tenant? Are they part of a condo or individual homes? And so the key I found from previewing your presentation and then hearing it again tonight is this partnership notion, that you're there to actually work with people to find the best solutions available. So even though I was not aware of most of these beforehand, it's inspiring to see that there is potential to find out more about it. And then in my case, take it to my condo board or property manager and say, are you aware of these? And have you looked into what we could be doing? Because a lot of them will pay back, results within the term of the loan. So it sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Very true. And we have been working diligently with condo boards, just because we typically find that a lot of the condos around the City of Toronto are underfunded. The Reserve Fund didn't recognize that we'd be facing 30% inflation in all building costs. And people are frankly unprepared for that. And it's really important to work together to find solutions, because I can't tell you how many buildings have no reserve fund to pay for any envelope retrofits. And when they have breakdowns and challenges, they have to find the money, and it's very challenging.
Yep. Somebody has asked whether you have any case studies of retrofits for church buildings. I know several of the churches within our North Toronto cluster have been working over the last 10 years to make some pretty significant changes. And it'd be interesting to see what kind of results have been documented.
So I'm actually going to pull up, yes, the answer is, and I actually have it right in front of me. We actually do have a case study for a church, and that's 19 Trinity Square, which had actually worked with the city with our navigation program to implement the heat pump project. So this can be made available. I can actually share it with you. They've successfully reduced 18% in total energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, reducing 24% they actually saw a 24% reduction in their total utility costs. So again, the idea is that improved operation, reduction in greenhouse gases, and also financial savings as well to help pay for that project. And one of the nice things about working with the navigation program is that we'll ensure and follow, really spend a lot of time ensuring that you're accessing all the incentives that are available. So in this specific project with, with the 19 Trinity Square, with this church, we were able to access a $3,750 incentive through the ISO. And that's the Independent Electricity Supply Operator. I assume that you learned about it last week. And they provide incentives for energy retrofits. And so our team will actually support and provide and submit the documentation, follow up, just to ensure that you get that incentive.
I know that our church, Eglinton St. George's in North Toronto, has done a fair bit of retrofits and renovations, even though 20 years ago we did a major renovation of the whole building. But even after 20 years, you've got things like the furnaces and stuff like that they replaced one huge boiler system with 20, space-based furnaces. And one of the things they were missing was a control system. And so they found out through probably IESO and Toronto Hydro that they could make an investment in putting in control systems to monitor those and control them. And they got the cost back on that within 2 years.
Absolutely. And that's a great example. And Enbridge probably would have also been involved in that as well.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there are a lot of, I would call it, missed opportunities, especially when you talk about, 20 systems, having controls in place to manage and to ensure that, you're not heating part of the building that you should be heating, you're not cooling part of the building. We also find that especially in churches where, you might have a program it used in one room one evening. Sometimes somebody from the team might go turn on all the lights, turn on all the systems to ensure that it'll be adequately warm. But then what ends up happening is that, nobody actually goes back to turn it off. So it's not until the members return the next morning and then notice that, hey, we've been heating this entire side of our church and unnecessarily heating it. So
that's exactly the sort of thing we were finding, especially because, as with most churches, you have to rent out a lot of your space in those evenings and so on. So this was a way to control it centrally. So,
Peter, it's actually interesting because all of the churches that we speak to have that similar point where they're renting out their space in order to help subsidize some of the costs.
We stay open.
Yeah, but when actually the conversation that I usually have with often the treasurer, but often the minister, like it's that it's actually an important community service, and I think it aligns really well with. Sorry, my daughter must be here for something. Yes, paper. Here we are. Yes, I have 4 kids actually. They might all visit. Who knows? The churches are actually providing a vital community service. And although there is some revenue and benefit to the church, and it does improve the operational and the ability, but to continue operating efficiently, but it is giving back to the community, and hopefully it's providing that circular benefit as well, bringing people in and really continuing on with the message of the church.
And to keep people engaged here for a little while longer before we wrap this up at 8:30, I can report from my wife that Toronto is actually leading 1-0.
Oh, great. Wow, that would be the surprise. What a shocker.
They have to do it 4 times in a row.
That's true.
Any other questions from people? There's a lot of information here, I know that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind stepping in here. So I'm just trying to clarify for my own benefit here. So I have an 80-year-old house. Insulation is negligible except in the ceiling, roof area, attic. Windows are original, single pane. Storms aren't much better. I got an efficient boiler on gas to heat via hot water. And just really quickly, with all that information, can you tell me what a walkthrough would do for me on something like this?
So, I do want to clarify that we don't actually provide walkthroughs to homeowners, just because there's too many homes. There's 400,000.
Okay.
Yeah, we do it for buildings. So any non-for-profit for sure. Any for-profit, as long as it's a minimum size, then we'll provide it. So I should make that clear.
I'll go to the website then. Okay.
But that being said, when it comes to a single-family home, your energy audit that you'd be investing in would actually identify a couple of aspects. First off, I mean, it would really verify that your lighting is up to date, just because we find that owners many owners have implemented like an LED retrofit, but a lot of people just are very comfortable with what they have. And so you might be wasting a lot of unnecessary cost or an unnecessary utility payments on your lighting. So that's a key part of that. And the energy audit really is going to be looking at your ear tightness in your home. And that's really critical because even though you talk about your insulation, are you really sure that you're leaky? Like, do we know if your home is leaking? Yes, you're right. If you put your hand against your window, you're going to feel that it's very cold. But is that where the issue is? Or maybe you're losing all your heat out of the roof, or maybe you're not. Maybe your front door is not adequately sealed. And that's really what any type of energy auditor should be looking for. It's where are the leaks in your home? Because you can save a lot of money by just doing some what we call ear sealing and going around taping. I tell my children all the time, like, just close the front door. That's all I ask you. And the real reason is because you are losing all of your energy out the front door. If you're not, if you feel you're around the door and you're just feeling not necessarily like above the frame, but where the door goes into the frame and you're feeling a lot of airflow, you're probably leaking a lot of heating or cooling, again, depending upon what you're running. And that's something that should be changed or improved upon. Around your windows, we would take a look to see if you're having condensation buildup. So is your home brick or stucco?
Brick. Block.
So we would look around if there's any degradation on the brick. So like that would demonstrate that there's a lot of condensation buildup. And then you would want to really improve the ear sealing, ensure that there's that you're managing what's called thermal breakage in your home. And so again, like what we know is that replacing windows doesn't necessarily solve the problem. What it does is it gets you nice new windows, and it's great, and it's a great way to sell a home. It improves the value. There's a lot of reasons to replace your windows, but often it's the operation issue. It's the fact that the seals have gone. It's the fact that you have a hole somewhere right near your window, and that's where you're losing a lot of your energy. And that is what the energy audit will do. When it comes to commercial, it's very hard to do that type of that type of ear testing. So we'll use something called a floor, which is I wish I had a picture of it for you, but I guess we can pull it up online. But it's a thermal imaging scan of a building. We'll use the same thing for a home, but it'll show up much stronger in any type of commercial building or condo. Actually, in a church, we're actually going to be doing one in a synagogue downtown in a couple of weeks. So.
Well, and the United Church of Canada has had a program over the last decade almost of providing energy audits to any churches that wish them to be done. And then that points out where they will get their best investment. So.
Yeah, and the energy audits are also critical as well because it'll look at your consumption. So, interestingly enough, and I don't believe home energy audits really look at your utility bills, but if I would look at hourly or your utility bills on an hourly or 15-minute interval, meaning I'm looking at the consumption every 15 minutes, I could probably tell you exactly where you're spending your money, whether it be a microwave, a faulty fridge. Your energy consumption patterns really tell a lot about the building. And when it comes to public sector buildings, our navigation program will take the time to look at your consumption patterns. And it might say, like, do you have an issue with, I don't know, whatever it is. Again, it might be a fridge, HVAC, boiler, something that's not operating as efficiently as possible.
I saw a note down below for recommendations on I think it was heat pumps, but so that leads to my question is on your site, if I walk through it, if it looks like there would be a recommendation for something like window replacement, door replacement, a heat pump, that type of thing. Do you have recommended vendors or contractors listed at all, or do you even do that?
So the City of Toronto doesn't recommend specific vendors. When it comes to buildings, well, actually, when it comes to both, we can point you in the way of associations that can give you guidance. So specifically, let's say you talk about heat pumps in homes. HRA can provide guidance on what you'd be looking for. We can provide guidance around like specification for what type of projects, or what you should be telling the vendors. So that's really important. But yeah, unfortunately we can't provide recommendations directly. Now, I didn't really focus this presentation, but if we have 10 minutes, I'll just share for 1 or 2 minutes. The federal government did initiate a project called the DRAI, Deep Retrofit Accelerator Initiative, where they're going to put around $180 million into enabling this type of recommendation and really providing the private sector with money to start setting up these associations that will give direct guidance and list vendors. And so that is going to be coming, I mean, maybe by the end of 2023, but early 2024 for sure. And we're going to see these accelerators opening up throughout It is national, so it'd actually be all throughout Canada, but you're going to see information around vendors, around who offers what product. It's going to become a lot more accessible very soon.
And similarly, somebody has a question about installing electric vehicle chargers in a 40-year-old 40-unit condo building, and asking about a list of recommended vendors. But I know from looking into this for my condo that there are organizations now that you can look into by just doing a Google search online, who will come into a condo building, and actually, if the condo provides the space for even one charger, the users of that pay for the use for charging their vehicles, and then at the end of the month, the condo is paid back for whatever hydro was used by those users. So the users pay for it, but this outside organization, it may have a minimum number of units, I don't know. They pay for it and not the property manager. So it's worth looking into, even though I'm still having trouble getting my condo to consider going ahead with it. So,
wow. Yeah, and I did want to add to Peter's comments that there are some additional questions that probably we would consider, like when evaluating if a building should or could implement electric vehicle charging. And it really is about the capacity. And it becomes very technical, sort of like how much capacity is available in the building. But yes, it is always nice if there are no direct capital costs that are billed to the condo board. What we've found is that a lot of condo buildings are implementing a full rollout of EV charging, and it's primarily based on building or unit values. So they attribute a premium or a cost premium that'll be made available if you have access to EV charging. So we are seeing a lot more of that. If there are issues around power, we can work with you to advise you on different strategies to help manage that.
Okay. Yeah, in our building, it's almost 600 parking spots because it's 2 condo towers plus a townhouse complex. So we're thinking with that number of cars and people starting to plan their next vehicle to be some form of EV, it would increase the value to the homeowners and to the building to at least put in a few chargers to start and see how they get used.
A case study. I mean, I wish I had one of these fancy case studies to share with you about it, but we do have a building in the city that they actually ran conduit to half the owners. So they ran the chargers to half of the spots, and then they worked within the confines of, or the legal limitations of their constitution to move people spots. I know it was very political in the building, but they basically, so the electric vehicles electric vehicle charging is made available to all spots on the east side, while the west side has no charging. And that helped keep the costs down, and it made sure that you started to demonstrate that it is possible. And it's kind of neat because I believe the first 8 owners have had delivery of their EV already. So it's neat to see how it's enabling people to actually
Well, and I actually have an EV, and we
Oh.
don't have a charger. But what I'm finding is you don't need one per car, because that's their solution now. You can install your own at your cost in your parking spot. But I only use it once a week to keep my car charged up to the amount I'm using my vehicle. And that's the case I find with most people. So, on that basis, it's very little time required to use that shared EV charging spot. And you can charge an awful lot of cars over the period of a week if people stagger it. So,
do you know if your building has access to like a typical outlet, like what we call trickle charging? So it wouldn't be like the tier 2; it would be.
There aren't in the garage now.
No, okay.
But at another building, just it's 15-minute walk away for me, 5,000 Yonge. It's a commercial building. They've actually, for the commercial users, to get people back to work at the building, they've installed something like 16 Tesla chargers and another 4 of other chargers for use when people come into the building during the day.
Wow.
I can go down there and at nighttime or on weekends pay $6 for a flat rate parking, and it includes the charging. It's a great deal.
Amazing. So if any of you are considering an electric vehicle, there are 3 tiers to charging. There's tier 1, which is trickle charge. It'll take you around 12 hours. Tier 2, maybe an hour or 2. And then there's tier 3, which is maybe what's made available in this building, where you can probably charge your entire vehicle in around 30 minutes.
They're using the mid-range chargers,
mid-range.
which still means, I can charge it up 10% per hour. So in 4 or 5 hours, I've usually got my car charged for the week.
Yeah, perfect. That's great to hear.
Because I think people do think they need their own charger, and it's not the case, as long as you've got access to one.
The city actually does have an initiative to create or to install chargers at all of our Green P stations, and many of them already have it. While it's not as cheap as $6, it still is low cost. Because there's no profit built in for Green P, so it's technically available at no profit, but it's still more money. So,
well, at a Tesla supercharger, I can charge the car from 20% in it for $20 in about half an hour to an hour. So
there you go. That's the tier 3. So you're it's like charging your battery on super speed.
And I could never fill my car for $20 before. So
no.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll let Chaim wrap up here. Wonderful. Well, I thank you for the time you put into this presentation. We did give you that list of questions ahead, and you did a good job of answering many of the questions that people from our committee had. And it sounds like you've answered questions for others, or you've boggled our minds with so many good ideas that we'll go to the TransformTO site and look for more information on how we follow it up for our individual requirements.
Yeah.
So.
And I did want to add, like, if there are any questions that you have, Peter, you do have my contact information. Yep. Please don't hesitate to just send me an email. I can dig through any information, provide you with the right resource through the city. We intend to make ourselves transparent and available. Please take advantage of that.
Well, I must say, I've been impressed by what City of Toronto is doing. It's more than we knew about. And so the other part of it is, using things like Live Green to get that message out there to more people.
Absolutely. Carolyn, yes. Carolyn?
Hi, one more question. I know that there are a couple of community groups in the city, like the Pocket Change project, that got a little bit of startup money from the city, not an awful lot, but a little bit. For those of you who don't know what Pocket Change is, it's there's an area called the Pocket, which is sort of a Danforth and Jones area. And they're a very green community focused group, and they have they've implemented this thing called Pocket Change, which they are basically encouraging as many people as possible to do the kinds of retrofits, including heat pumps. and providing a, I guess, sort of advice, like there's some members of the community who are sort of acting as, I gather, volunteer consultants, sort of, in a way. I don't know if that's a good way of putting it. I was wondering whether that kind of initiative would be restricted to geographical communities, or whether church communities could potentially provide something similar. So this group, for example, which is, sort of, we're representing 7 different churches, would any one of those churches be able to look into that option of kind of having somebody, encouraging and providing information to people with maybe with help from the city consulting process? I mean, is that something that you think could make sense as sort of a church community, as opposed to a geographic? Because obviously some people are in a geographic community right next to the churches, but other people come from a little ways away. But is that something that you think is feasible?
So the answer, everything's feasible. And I don't know where they identified or how that funding was made available, and if it came directly from the city. I can reach out to the project manager working on the pocket change report and see how that came together. As far as like the funding for training, our home energy loan program does offer training that anybody who's looking to become who's looking for a more in-depth knowledge and would like to learn more about heat pumps, how they operate, which buildings that they potentially would serve, and really looking for a lot more technical information, we can make training available. And so that's definitely something that we can put forward. And as far as the geographic location, so the rationale behind the geographic discussion is that typically neighbors see other neighbors implementing these heat pumps, similarly to what occurred here, like where you see one person implemented geo, and now it's becoming a discussion topic. And so that was the idea behind the neighborhood approach, is that when you see that geo or lighting retrofits or whatever people are doing insulation, it triggers this, like, almost, I wouldn't call it jealousy, but it is a goal of trying to keep up with your neighbors, and that's exactly what the Pocket Change project is all about. It's really creating I guess a common goal for everyone to focus on decarbonization. A little bit
sharing knowledge about what's available too.
Yes, absolutely, sharing knowledge. Yeah. And so geographically it does work, but it could also work in an online forum, or I imagine it could work. Definitely I'd be interested in reaching out to the project manager to see how funding was made available, and how it could be replicated. And just, we would like to see it replicated. I just don't know that the program has been advanced enough to replicate it yet.
Right. Is it more like like sort of a pilot project, I guess, is Pocket Change?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, certainly I know that we've been getting people stopping by our door. We put in a heat pump just, like within the last month. And so we have the little sign up now saying, that this household, And so we have been able to start conversations because of that sign, for sure. So, but I don't think, I mean, with the church newsletters and a lot of people in various churches being close to the actual physical church, I mean, it's not that a completely, disparate group in terms of geography, but there is some, there's some that are close together, and then some that are not. I still think it could potentially. So is that something that I could get in touch with you about, and you could?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm more than happy to reach out and put you in touch with the project manager who's leading that initiative. And this is exactly the type of grassroots initiatives that we're looking for. It takes, each individual's actions in order for us to achieve our goals, everyone needs to get involved. And I'm really happy to hear that you mentioned this idea, that the fact that your heat pump has attracted some attention, your sign has triggered people coming over to ask about it, and that is exactly what it's all about. So yes, I'd be interested in more discussion. Yes, I'd be interested in trying to put you in touch with that person. I'm just not that familiar with how that program operates. So
Great, thanks.
And I've just put your email address in the chat group
sure.
if people did have specific questions they wanted to follow up. Thank you. So thanks once again.
Okay, well, it really was a pleasure meeting all of you, and thank you for your time.